Well, I want to say welcome to you. We're glad that you're here, and we're glad that those of you that are watching at 5 o'clock today, we're glad that you're with us, and those of you that are watching online, we want to say welcome to you as well. We're thankful that you're here for this series, Out of Control. Now, how many of you were a part of this last week? Just raise your hand if you were with us last week, Out of Control. Just hold it up high. Hold it up high. Now, I want those of you with your hands up, look around and judge someone with your eyes that wasn't here last week, okay? You don't need to say anything, but you know that look that you give that you're just like, no, we're glad that you're all here today. This series is going to be awesome. It's called Out of Control, and we're excited about what God is going to do in these four more weeks together today and the next 3 weeks. I'm super excited about what God's going to do in this room over the next 4 weeks. But I'm even more excited, if you want to know the truth, I'm even more excited about what God's going to do in people's community groups. And we call them CGs, and just for the record, I've been saying this a lot, they are not CG groups, okay? If that's confusing to you, let me see if I can explain it. A CG is a community group. A CG group is a community group, okay? And we don't have any of those. And so if you're not in a CG, you need to get in one. If you've been coming around for a while, we're glad to have you every Sunday. God's doing amazing things, man. God has been working in people's lives this morning. We've seen people come to salvation in Jesus Christ in the last 2 services. And so God's doing great things here. But I'll tell you, he'll change your life even more in a group. And so get some friends, get the material group up. We're just getting started, and so we want you to be a part of that. Now, how many of you have ever felt like life was out of control? Let's raise your hand if you've ever felt like life was out of control. How many of you have ever contributed to life being out of control? Like you feel like you made some decisions that helped it get more out of control. Just hold them up high. We want to see who you are. We want to avoid you. No, you know, this happened for me a while back. So we have a dog, and my oldest son got a dog for his third, let's say, I guess he was about 9 years old. He was in 3rd grade for his birthday. And we are just not very good dog people, okay? And so I know some of you are awesome dog people. You take your dog everywhere. Your dog goes on vacation with you, and your dog goes shopping and has clothes and stuff. We're not that kind of people. So nobody wants to take care of our dog. Nobody wants to feed the dog. Nobody wants to water the dog. Nobody wants to take the dog out or put the dog in. Nobody wants to take care of the dog. And so my wife, about 2 years ago, she started saying she wanted another dog. And I'm like, why? What would possess you to want another dog? And so we started having this conversation, and she decides she wants a dog of her own. And she's got a specific kind that she wants. She wants a golden doodle. And no, you stop that. And so she's telling me how great golden doodles are. Golden doodles, they are so smart, Paul, and they're hypoallergenic, or whatever that word is, allergenic, and they're great. This dog will take care of himself. And maybe take care of a few of our kids, you know? Like, these dogs are awesome. And I held strong for 2 years. I mean, for almost 2 years, I was standing firm. I was fighting the good fight. I was saying, we are not getting another dog. We are not going to get another dog. No, I put my foot down, and I stood like a man. We're not getting another dog. Now, you need to know this. You know the love languages? Like I think I've told you this before. My love languages are physical touch, quality time, and touch me again, okay? And so my wife's love languages are gifts and acts of service. That's not right. Like, words of affirmation, if your spouse has the gift of words of affirmation, you should be down on your knees every night thanking God for that. That is so much better than gifts. Like, you just got to say something good to them you got to decide what to buy. You got to go to the store. Gifts are way more difficult. And so that's the one that my wife has. And so we get to Christmas this year. And we got about 3 days to Christmas, 4 days to Christmas. And I didn't have any idea for a gift. That's why we got a dog. You can't tell her that, but that's why we got a dog. I was like, well, I can't think of anything else that will make her happy. And so I start Googling golden doodles. And listen, y'all, they are proud of golden doodles. Like, I need a cheap golden doodle. Y'all got like a 3-legged golden doodle? Is there a place that does that, you know? Like mentally retarded golden doodles? I'll take one of those. And so we get a we finally find one that's like more our price range. And so I was like, maybe this is a sign from God. We need another dog. So I get this dog. I keep it with family for 2 days until Christmas. Christmas morning comes, and my daughter, Julia, she wanted a dog too. So it's my wife and Julia, we're fighting for a little girl dog, and me and the boys were holding strong. We don't want a dog. If we get a dog, we want a manly dog. A golden doodle is not a manly dog. And so we're holding strong. And so I decided now this is good, though, because I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, Julia and my wife. And so we exchange gifts in the living room, and I say, hold on just a minute. I go out to the garage, and I bring in a box, and I'm making them close their eyes. I bring in the box and set it down. The dog pops out, and everybody's like, oh, oh my gosh. And they're panicking and freaking out. And that lasted for about a week. And then nobody wanted to take care of the dog. I'm exaggerating that a little bit. My wife was, okay with it. But then we start doing the kennel training. And kennel training, like you put the dog in the kennel, and what do they tell you? If you put a dog in a kennel, it's like his den, his house, his place. He will never pee in his own den or his own house. They are liars. That is a lie. This dog's peeing in there all the time. Come to find out, we think our dog has anxiety disorder. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. That's probably why we got him cheaper, I'd done a psychological evaluation on him as a puppy. This dog's messed up. Send him to them, And so the dog's peeing in the kennel. That's not so bad. Then one day, he poops in the kennel. And I'm going to work, so I've already left. And my wife calls me and says, this is Paul. Champ. They named him after me. And she says, Champ pooped all in the kennel. I'm like, oh, man, I hate that I've already left for work. She's like, it's all over him. It's a disaster. She takes him and cleans him up, and she, calls me, going, oh, that was the biggest mess. Oh, that was awful. That was terrible, da-da-da. About a week goes by, and I've gone to work out and headed to work, and my wife calls me, and she goes, Paul, Champ pooped in the kennel again. It's everywhere, and I don't have time to clean it up right now. I'm like, well, you wanted a dog. And so I'm like, well, I've already gone. I can't do anything about it. She goes, well, I'm just going to leave him in the kennel till I get, for 2 or 3 hours. I know, that's terrible. I told you we're not dog people. And so she says, I'm going to just leave him in the kennel for 2 or 3 hours, and then I'll come home and clean him up. And I'm there, and I'm finishing up, and I'm about to leave, and I'm starting to remember her love languages. It's not just gifts, it's also acts of service. And I'm like, oh, that would be an act of service. And then God is like, speaking to me, and I'm like, stop that, God. Quit doing this, And so I went home, and I cleaned the dog. I took the dog out of the kennel. He is like a disaster. I'm not trying to gross you out, but it was gross. Like, he is rolling around in it. It's all over him everywhere. His face just looks terrible. And I'm a little bit like, that's what you get. That's your fault. You did that. But I take him out, and I take him in there, and I clean him up, and it's disgusting. And I'm saying things to this dog that no pastor should ever say. I'm shaming him. I'm probably increasing his anxiety disorder. And then I'm like, but you know what? I did this. I contributed to our house being more out of control. You ever felt like that? Like, this is my fault. I had a part in this. That's what we're talking about. That's what we talked about last week, that things are out of control. And we want to be in control, but we mess it up on our own. And we want to be in control of our finances. We want to be in control of our job. We want to be in control of our spouse. We want to be in control of our kids. We want to be in control of our health. We want to be in control of our image, right? You want to be in control of your image? You ever get mad when somebody posts a picture on social media that you're like, that is the worst picture we took of me? Why didn't they post a bad one of them? We want to be in control of our image, right? I had an experience several years ago. My wife's basketball team, she's coaching at Rockwall High School. They won a state championship. And so it was kind of a big deal. About a month later, we're in Rockwall eating. We stop by her office, and I go, and on her desk is sitting this little magazine. It's called Lakeview Living. It's for communities surrounding the Lake Ray Hubbard area, so like Rockwall, Rowlett. And on the cover was a picture of her basketball team. And I was like, hey, what is this? And she goes, well, they wrote an article about our team since we won state. And so I go, well, here, I want to read this. And so I took it with me. I gave her the keys. I said, you drive home. I'm going to read this. She's driving home. I start reading. Now, you need to know this about me. Like, I consider myself to be athletic, okay? Now, I was never a great athlete. Like, I wasn't a superstar at any sport. Not even going to lie about that. I was just kind of a very average athlete. I played sports growing up, but I was never great at anything, but I was okay. But I've always prided myself in being an athlete or being athletic. And so I start reading this article. And this article, the first page was about my wife. It starts talking about Coach McDill. Coach McDill, grew up in Mesquite, Texas. She played basketball in North Mesquite, and she played basketball at Baylor, and she started coaching here, and it goes through these things. And then it turns to her family. And it says Coach McDill's husband is a pastor in the East Dallas area. They have 3 boys, 3 kids, and it tells their names and the ages. And then I get to this one line. And this one line says this. This one line says, while Coach McDill's husband is not an athlete. I said, hold on a second. Where did they get this information? And my wife is over and she's like, Paul, I did not say that. I did not say. I'm like, that is fake news. I wanted to email the guy and demand a retraction. I'm one of the few people that have an imprint that they're not an athlete. So what I'm saying is we can't control our image, can we? And so last week we talked about this universal condition that we want to be in control. But when we're in control, we take on all kinds of stress. And the reality is that Jesus said we don't have to live that way. Jesus said, come to me, all you who are burdened and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus was telling us there is a better way for us to live. And so that's where we pick up in this week's message. In Luke chapter 12, picking up with this idea of control. Luke chapter 12, if you have your Bible, turn there in verses 13. We're going to start. It says, someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made you a judge or an arbitrator? Who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. In other words, Jesus was saying life is not about stuff. Life is about more than stuff. And so you don't have to freak out here. This isn't going to be a money sermon. But it says in verse 16, it says, And he told them a parable, saying, The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. It says there's a guy, and he's a rich man, and he's doing so well. And you got to understand, they lived in an agrarian society, so your crops were your wealth. This guy is knocking it out. He's killing it. As Kanye West would say, he's not a businessman, he's a businessman. Got it? So anyway, oh, that was not good? Not good? Okay. Worked really good at 8:30, but 10 and y'all, they were kind of nice. So anyway, he's doing well. He is knocking it out of the park. He's killing it. And in fact, it's so good that it creates problems for him. It's so good that he's like, man, I've got a new problem. I don't have enough space to store all of my richness. Those are called rich people problems, right? And those are the kind of problems that you're like, I wish I had those kind of problems. And so look at what he says in verse 18. It says, and he says to himself, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Jesus is painting a picture here of a life that is so under control. It's so under control that his biggest problems aren't even real problems. This guy's biggest problems are not even real problems. They're not problems that you and I would think are problems. His life is so under control that Jesus is describing he's got a worry-free life. That what he's going to be able to do is just build his bigger barn, store up his stuff, and then he's going to kick back, put his feet up, and just relax. He'll just be able to eat, drink, and be merry. Not have to worry about anything. He's not going to have to worry about paying for his kids' college. He's not going to worry about how does he make the ends meet. He's not going to worry about building up a nest egg big enough to retire. He's not worried about any of that. He's got a worry-free life. And my guess is that you're probably feeling the same way about this guy that his audience was. You're like, that wouldn't be so bad, right? Right? Don't you think that? You go, well, that wouldn't be so bad. I mean, this guy's got it made. In fact, there were probably people in the audience that were Instagramming out goals. You know, this guy's got it going on. This is the way that I wish my life would be. Maybe one day in 10 years or so, our life can be like that. And we can not worry about life. And just when everybody was thinking that, just when everybody in the audience, all of the crowd, was thinking this guy has got the life, Jesus gives him a left hook. Look at what it says in verse 20. They're salivating over this ideal life, daydreaming about how awesome it would be. And Jesus says, but God said to this man, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? Jesus says that night, God takes his life, that he doesn't live any longer. And before you start, I think there's a tendency of us to go, well, isn't Jesus being a little over dramatic here? I mean, does this really happen? Is this what Jesus was about? And there's a tendency of us to think that, but we all know people in this condition, right? I mean, don't you know people who were in their 40s? And that they ran every day. They went for 5-mile runs every morning. They hadn't eaten a carb in 6 years. Living on kale. And they have a heart attack. And they're gone. I mean, that happens all the time, right? We know those people. We know stories about those people. What Jesus is teaching us, this is not a parable about money. What Jesus is telling them is it doesn't matter how in control you feel. There's only one person in this universe that's in control, and that's God. It doesn't matter how you arrange your life, how you set up your circumstances. There's only one that's in control, and that's God. This isn't a parable about money. This is a parable about the illusion of control. Your life is held in the hands of God. Your life is being held in the hands of God. The psalmist wrote about it in Psalm 139, verse 16. He said, all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. It doesn't matter if you have a metabolic age of 29. Your life can end tonight. We've all seen the interviews of the guy that's 106, right? And they're like, well, what's your secret? And he says, well, I drink 3 Dr. Peppers a day. You're like, I don't think that's a secret, but bring me a Dr. Pepper, you know? And the reality is this. The reality is that we're not in control. And what Jesus was teaching them is, listen, when you think you've got all the circumstances set up just right, you think, man, I've got my scene just right. That's an illusion of control. When my oldest son was about 8, we would play PlayStation together, and so we would get up there and we would play. He liked to play Madden football, and so we would get the newest Madden game, and we would be playing Madden football, and we're playing along, and some people I know let their kids win. I don't let my kids win. I'm like, you got to learn about life, son. You want to win? Get better. And so that's the way it works. And so my 3-year-old son, Noah, though, Noah was 3 at the time, and he wanted to play with us, but he didn't really have the ability to play. And so here's what we would do. We would get an old controller that looked just like ours that didn't work, and I would give it to Noah, and I'd say, Noah, here, you get to play. And I would point to a guy on my team, and I would say, that's you. And if the guy did good, I'd high-five him and say, good job, Noah. If the guy made a mistake, I'd say, come on, Noah, you're killing us here. And he's got that control, and he's watching the game, and he's moving controllers. And isn't that the way we live our lives? Like we live with this illusion of I'm in control here. And Jesus was saying, no, that's an illusion. This guy wasn't in control at all. And some of you have a tight grip on the controller, but I'm telling you, whatever control you feel like you have in life is just an illusion. And then Jesus transitions from a parable into some teaching. And I got to tell you, I've been a Christian for a minute, and I never connected these two passages. I never connected these two passages. I've taught on both passages. I've taught on the story that we just read, and I've taught on the teaching that Jesus is about to give us. I've taught on both of those, and I never thought about the fact that they're connected. And it's so obvious. I feel so stupid in this because look at what Jesus says in verse 22. He starts off with therefore. And that's simple, right? That means this is connected to what I was just talking about. And look at what he says. He says, therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. In other words, Jesus was saying, hey, since you're not in control of your life anyway, since God has the number of days ordained for you, since it's God that holds your life in the palm of his hands, since you can be here one moment and gone the next, don't worry about all this stuff that's outside of your control anyway. It's kind of funny to me because look at what Jesus doesn't say. He doesn't say don't worry about your reputation. He doesn't say don't worry about if you're going to be able to afford that family vacation this year. He says don't worry about what you will eat or wear. Somebody should have told Jesus about Maslow's hierarchical needs, right? Somebody should have informed Jesus about it because if you look it up, what you'll find is that those are the most basic of needs that he describes. Until those needs are met, your brain doesn't even worry about other stuff. And Jesus says, yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. My Father has even those things under control. Our God has even those things under control. And he goes on, look at what he says. For life, in verse 23, for life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. In other words, he's saying, contrary to what some people believe, your life is not just about survival. You're so worried about if you're going to have enough, if your family is going to be taken care of, if your needs are going to be met. You're worried about survival, and you need to understand that life is about more than survival. That's one of our core tenets as a church. We really believe that. We desperately believe that God has a purpose for your life. If you're in here and you're sitting in a seat and you're breathing oxygen, God has a purpose for your life. You should hear that today. There are good works that God has ordained for you to do. God has a reason for you to be around. He's got a purpose for your life. But until you stop worrying about all the things that are outside of your control anyway, you'll never discover the good purpose that God has for you. And he goes on. Verse 24. And this is where it gets really interesting. He says, consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? I mean, think about that. Jesus tells us, Jesus gives us a command. He says, think about the ravens. How many of you have spent any time this last week thinking about ravens? Not the Baltimore Ravens, like birds in the air. Anybody? No, we don't do that much, do we? What's Jesus saying? Why is he telling us to do that? He says, think about the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn. In other words, he's saying, ravens don't have refrigerators. Ravens don't have pantries. And yet still they find stuff to eat. Still God takes care of them. I mean, right? Think about it. Everybody in this room, I don't care what your bank account says or what your circumstances are. Everybody in this room has more to their name than a raven. Right? We've got more. Everybody in this room has more to your name. You've got more to your name than a raven. And how do ravens live? Ravens wake up in the morning and they're like, oh, I'm hungry. And then they see a cricket hopping by and they scoop it up and eat it. Like, oh, breakfast. Then they go a little while longer, they get hungry again, and they see the McDills pull up in the Suburban, in the parking lot. Family starts filing out, French fries are coming out of the car, chocolate-covered raisins, whatever we had for that day. They're like, oh, food, I'm taken care of. And then I love this line, listen, because I think this is so crucial. I don't know what Cree means. He's talking about ravens, and he's saying, look, they don't have anything to store food in. They don't have a refrigerator or a pantry, and yet they're taken care of. They're fed. Have you ever seen an anxious raven? Right? Have you ever seen a stressed out parakeet? No. And look at what he says at the end of it. He says, yet God feeds them, and then he says this, of how much more value are you than the birds? And I think Jesus has given us interesting insight to our stress and our anxiety and our worry, isn't he? Saying, of how much more value are you than the birds? See, listen, I really believe this. If you ever, just lean in, lock eyes with me for a minute. Just put down the pens and just look at me for a minute. Because I really believe this is true. If you ever became fully convinced of how much God cares for you, you would trust him to take care of you. I'm telling you, if it ever really soaked into your heart how much our God cares for you, you would trust him to take care of you. It says it all through the Bible. Genesis 1:26 says you have been made in the image of God. God created you, and he made you in his own image. He put his stamp on you. Psalm 139 says he knitted you together in your mother's wombs. Luke 12:7 says he has the hairs on your head numbered. That's a more difficult task for some of you than for others. But think about that. How concerned does God have to be with your life to number the hairs on your head? How much does God have to care about you to do that? John 3:16 says God loves you so much he sent his only son to die on the cross for you. God, just think about that. God loves you so deeply, so much. He sent his only son to die on the cross for you. And part of your problem is that you don't know your value to God. You think that just because God, there are 7 billion people on the planet, that there's nothing unique or special about you. You think that just because there's 7 billion people on the planet that there's nothing about you that stands out, that God couldn't be really interested in you. And I'm telling you, no, that's not true. If you ever really were fully convinced about how much God cares for you, you would trust him to take care of you. A little girl, she's 6, Julia, and Julia has a lot of great qualities. I call her sunshine with skin on. I mean, when she's around, she just brightens up a room. When you're in her presence, you just get happier. She's beautiful. She's funny. She's smart. She's caring. So much fun to be around. She's got a lot of great qualities, but she doesn't have an ounce of bravery in her body. It's pathetic and it's frustrating. Like a bug flies by and she freaks out. So this summer we're at the swimming pool, and she can swim. Like she knows how to swim, and she starts swimming, and she can come up for air and get a breath and go back and swim some more. But she wants to stay over here in the shallow end. She wants to swim where if she has to, she can reach and she can touch and kind of bob her head up. And so I tell her, I said, Julia, come here, and I grab her, and she doesn't want to go because she knows what's about to happen, but I pull her out into the deep end, and I say, Julia, I want you to do something. I want you to swim across from one side to the other. And it's not all that far. I mean, it's probably maybe, 30 feet or so. And she's got the ability to do it, and she's saying, no, Daddy, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I said, Julia, come on, I want you to do this. And listen, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk beside you. It's like a 4-foot pole. I'm able to stand up just like this. And I tell her, I said, look, I'm standing up. I'm going to walk right beside you the whole way till you get your hands on the other side. I'll be right beside you, Julia. Come on. And she's like, no, I don't want to do it. And she gets teary-eyed. And I said, Julia, why do you not want to do this? What are you scared of? And she says, I'm scared I'll drown. And I thought to myself, you have way underestimated how deeply I care about you. You have way underestimated how deeply I care about you. Listen, I mean, there would be more of a chance of me drowning than her drowning. Right? Those of you with kids know that, right? Well, there is no way that's going to happen. But isn't that the way we approach God? We have way underestimated how deeply our Heavenly Father cares about us. And Jesus says in verse 25, it's like not to mention, and which of you by being anxious can add a single hour to his span of life? And if then you are not able to do as small things as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Same way, you can't, it doesn't help anything, right? I mean, worrying's never made you any taller, right? In verses 27 and 28, he makes the exact same argument a second time, but this time he uses lilies instead of ravens. He said, consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. In other words, they don't work at all. They don't even try to take care of themselves. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today, and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O you of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried, for all the nations of the world seek after these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Now, I don't know, maybe you missed it. Listen, that should be convicting to us. Because you know what Jesus was saying? You know what he was saying when he said, for all the nations of the world do that? He was saying, that's how the pagans live. He was talking to believers, and he was saying, listen, when you talk about worrying and being anxious and trying to, figure out how I'm going to be in control, that's the way people live who don't believe in God. Right? Think about it. If you don't believe in God, you better take care of it yourself. You gotta handle it if you don't believe in God. But Jesus is saying, hey, that's the way people live who don't believe in God. But that's not our story, is it? Right? That's not your story, is it? I mean, your story isn't that God exists. For most of us in this room, our story is that God has come through over and over and over. Right? Our story is that there was a day that I was way far away from God, but he saved me miraculously. Is that your story? Your story is that through the years when you were lost and you were hopeless and you were helpless, God rescued you, right? Your story is that when your marriage was on the brink of failure, God did something. Jesus is saying, why do you want to live like the pagans? Why do you want to live as if you don't believe in God? That's not our story. And then in Philippians 4:6, it says it this way, be anxious for nothing. Be anxious for nothing. See, at the end of the day, and maybe we tricked you with the title of the series, this title, Out of Control. And you might have thought, hey, oh good, it's going to be a series about how life is out of control, and I'm going to be able to get back in control. They're going to give me some steps, maybe 6 steps to gaining control of your life. That's not what this series is about. This series is about the reality that your life is out of control. And there's only one who is in control. And whatever control you think you have is just an illusion. I can't tell you how many times I've been to the hospital. I can think of one specific time in there with a young lady whose dad had a brain aneurysm. And she said those exact words. She said, I just feel so out of control. And I looked back at her and I said, you were always out of control. No matter what you think you've set up, you're out of control. It's an illusion. See, my wife, I don't always ask my family if I can tell stories about them, but I asked my wife about this one. And you should know this about my wife. If you don't know her, my wife Jill is, when you hear people say they married over their head. Like, I married way over my head. Like, sometimes people will say that and they're trying to kind of aggravate me a little bit or insult me. They're like, oh, you married over your head. I'm like, no kidding. I know that. That is not an insult to me. I'm well aware of that. When Jill and I got married in college, I had friends that actually said me marrying Jill gave them hope. So let that sink in. They weren't really encouragers. She's beautiful. She's way better looking than I am. I know you find that hard to believe. She is. She's beautiful. She's smart. She's smarter than me. She's definitely more athletic than me. She's spiritual. She loves God. And back in March, through a series of events that I don't have time to give you all the details of, some things kind of came crashing in, and all of a sudden she just felt like the walls of her soul were just collapsing on her. And she went through this period of anxiety and panic attacks. I've never understood it before. I've never gotten it. I know when we talk about anxiety and worry, people's eyes lock in and you can tell people are dealing with it. I've never understood it. I don't worry a lot. And then all of a sudden my wife, who loves God more than I do, she's got, a deep faith. Strong, man. She is one of the strongest people I've ever known. And she is just crying like crazy. Just feels like life is shutting down on her and doesn't know how she's going to deal with it. And I would come home from work, and she didn't want to ever be by herself. When she was off in the day, she would go to her parents, and I'd come home from work, and she would just wrap her arms around me, and we would just cry together, and she would say, Paul, am I ever going to be okay? And I would say, you know how sometimes you answer questions, and you're not really positive, but you're speaking in faith, and I'd say, Joe, you're going to be okay. God's going to get us through this. God's going to get us through this. God's going to get us through this. And I don't mean this wasn't like 3 days. This is like 2 months. Every single day. Every single day. And some days were better than others, but none of them were good. She was in counseling, and through a lot of counseling and a lot of times she would come back and she would tell me what she'd talked about with her counselor, and she realized that, man, I just have this desire to be in control. She's a high achiever. Like, I just have this desire to be in control, and I realized I'm not in control. And she talked about how her therapist had her write down some areas that she was weak in, and she said, that was just so hard for me. To just admit my weakness was so hard. Paul, I don't know how to do that. And I said, Jill, she goes, why is it so hard for me to admit being weak? And I said, I don't know, but you need to come to reality. You are weak. It's like, well, when I realize I'm out of control, I just feel so weak. And I'm like, that's because you are weak. You are weak. And here's the reality of it, that it's in your weakness that you're strong. Some of you are here today, and you need to hear that. You've been thinking, man, I'm strong, and you're not strong, you're weak, and it's only through your weakness that you'll ever be strong, because it's when you're willing to be weak. Say, man, I can't do it. I'm not in control. I'm not in charge, and I've got to depend on God, who's in control and in charge. And by the grace of God, she's come. I didn't tell anybody, I didn't tell this at the last service, and a couple of people asked me, she's come through it. It's still a struggle, but I wanted to illustrate it for you this way, maybe. There we go. You know, this is the way we live our lives, isn't it? That we have control, we're holding on. And we're like, man, I'm holding on tight. And I've got my family in check, and I've got my spouse, you know, where they need to be, and my kids are right, and my job is good, and I'm able to add a little money to the bank account every month, and so that's good. My finances are good, and I'm in control, and everything feels good. My health is okay, but after a while of doing this, what happens? I mean, after a while, you start to lose your grip, don't you? Right? You ever been there where you felt like you were losing your grip? Like you couldn't really hang on to it anymore, and you lose your grip a little bit, and you're praying the whole time, God, just help me hang on. Help me hang on, God. And you're losing a little grip, and you're praying, God, help me hang on. Help me hang on, God. And you feel a little strength every once in a while. You hang on a little tighter. Till a little time goes by, and then you're like, God, help me hang on, but I'm losing my strength. And finally, you get to the very end of this. You ever prayed that prayer? God, I'm at the end of the rope. God, I'm at the end of my rope, and you're at the very end, and you're hanging on, and you know you're at the end, but you're trying to hang on, and you get this desperate prayer, this, God, you got to do something, God. Come on, God, help me. God, do something. God, I believe you're real. God, help me. And you keep waiting for God to give you an answer, to say something like, oh, come on. You keep waiting for God to say, hey, you can do it. Hang on. Just keep holding on. And I'm trying, God, I'm holding on. And you keep waiting for God to say, come on, keep holding on, keep holding on, keep holding on. But you're waiting and you're not hearing God say that. You're like, God, come on. You keep waiting for God to say, man, I'm going to give you strength so you can hold on to that rope. God, my marriage is failing. Hey, hold on, I'm going to give you strength. God, my kids are sick. Hold on, I'm going to give you strength. God, I lost my job. Hold on, I'm going to give you strength. I'm going to give you strength. But God doesn't say that, does he? You know what he says? He says, let go. What? God, let go? I can't let go, God. If I let go, I'm doomed. If I let go, all is gone. If I let go, it's miserable, God. And God says, no, just let go. And eventually you get to a place where you just can't hang on anymore. And you let go. And it's only there, it's only when you let go that you discover that God was holding you the whole time. It's only when you let go. It's only when you let go that you discover that, hey, it wasn't my strength that got us through it. It's only when you let go that you discover, hey, it wasn't because I'm so good or I'm so smart or I work harder than everybody. It's only when you let go that it's because our Heavenly Father is good. It's only when you let go that you discover it's because God was holding you up. It's only when you let go that you discover that God cares about you. It's only when you let go that you discover that your Heavenly Father would never walk beside you and let you drown, but that He's been holding you the whole time. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I believe there's somebody here today that this message was just for you. And I want to ask you today, there's some people in this room today that have never done that. They've never really fully trusted God with their lives. And today, for the first time, you can do that. You can accept the free gift of salvation that Jesus Christ died to give you. And I'm not going to do anything to embarrass you. I promise I'm not going to ask you to come forward or anything else, but if that's you and you would say, man, I know today that I need to trust God with my life. I've never done that before, but I know today that I need to do that. Would you just lift a hand? I want to pray for you. If that's you and you're saying, I know that that's me, I see you. See several over here. Just hold it up where I can see you. Hands all across the room. Any others? You'd say, I know that's me. I've never done that. I've never done that. I want to give God control. Yeah, thank you. Any others? Pastor from your campus is here, and he's going to come and lead you in a prayer.